Everyone who hears can be made new. That just rocks me every time I think that thought. Hey, I am so excited to be at Brookhaven today. This is like going to like the Hall of Fame. Like, you're sort of semi-apologizing that you're focusing on all the people you're sending out. It's like, oh my goodness, I would love to be in 1,000 churches like that. Because you've sent out some. I was just looking through all the extra stuff you do locally here. Youth for Christ, so impacting my life when I was a teen. Grace House, wow, cool. Grant County Rescue Mission and the Bridges to Health and the Pregnancy Health Center. And then start going a little further out to the Decade Project and Embrace Ministry. You guys are involved in the Jesus Film and World Gospel Mission, partners with us and global partners. And I just want to say thank you. I wanted to just stand up and let nobody else clap, but let me clap and say thank you, thank you, thank you for what you're doing. And then I looked at the actual people you send out. I was just with the Cromers in Uganda where we ordained the first 8 pastors in the country for the Wesleyan Church. And it's like, yeah! And I want to tell you, like these guys, rock stars, is that appropriate for missionaries? Just what they're doing and how they're doing it. In fact, we're trying to adapt that model to several other places, because here's what was really cool about it. For the students that just graduated from the Bible college and were ordained, that happened in August and September. 4 of them started teaching in the Bible college. See, if you're going to multiply, you actually have to have people that actually multiply. And they were just ordained, just, ready, and they're already teaching the next set of Bible college students. And then the Gallants, I was here in January, when we ordained them. And I'll tell you what, I just couldn't be more excited about what's happening there. Some new medical initiatives that are opening up doors. They get discipleship in ways that, and then the Burgos, can't talk about where they're from. We all know where they're from, but we don't actually say it publicly. But oh my goodness, I was just with them in a new city that we're looking at in that country. Listen to this. In that one city, there are 1 million university students. The largest university city in the world. In the whole of the Big Ten, all of the schools put together, there's 550,000 students. In this one city, there's 1 million university students. God's opening up a door for us a lot through Peter and the ministry he's had, Corey and Emily and the Hines. I could just tell stories after story. The months has already got to tell. Julene, like, hello. Talk about places where we go, both here and near and far. I brought my ampersand. I already talked about it, I guess, on the video. But here, near, far, hard. I don't always add this, but sometimes it's not just here, near, far, hard, but it's dark. And where Julene is, well, be one of the darkest places in the world. I can't tell you how essential your prayers are. She is so strong and such a woman of God. Like, I couldn't be more excited about having somebody like her in a place like that. You make that possible. And, oh, wait, here's my prayer card. It's out on the table if you guys want to pick it up. By the way, we have new prayer cards. We've just updated. In fact, your wall is out of date, actually, and we're going to update it today with cards that are left over. But I want to say, don't just put this in the refrigerator. Put it on your heart to lift up these people. What a great story. On the way to school every day. Some of you take 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15, 20 minutes to get to work. What would it be like if they just popped up and you prayed for your missionaries every day? How awesome would that be? They live on that. They live on that. So I just want to say thank you. Just so glad to be here. Again, to be with Pastor Tony, be with Pastor John again. And then I feel like I know the rest of the staff and are part of us in so many ways. Hello, they're part of our family, and just good to be here. And then I missed the Ackermans. I must have flipped through their card. They're in a special prayer emphasis. Probably some of you joined that. They're in a really special prayer emphasis in Albania. It's one of our most fruitful fields in Europe right now. God's moving in powerful ways, partly because Matt and Carol have been there. They've stayed there. They've just opened up their home. Nobody opens their home like the Ackermans do. And people come, people get saved. Whole families are coming to Christ. Churches are being developed. And I just want to say thank you again for what you're doing. And again, it matters what you're doing everywhere. Because it's not just out there And I'm so grateful. When I see a church that's involved in so many places locally, so many places regionally, and then around the world, again, it's all about here. Who else is responsible for here? You have to be. But it's near, and so you look a little beyond in the region and places that are a little outside of just the church ministry kind of things. But you're also going the places that are far and the places that are really hard. And I want to just say thank you, thank you, thank you again. It's a joy to be here today. I want to begin with just three big truths. And I share these most of the places I go because I think this is just a good starting point. The first one is this, that God is always on mission. He's always on mission. He never gets distracted. He never, is like, hey, I'm kind of doing these other things right now. I'll get back to the mission. We get distracted, don't we? We get distracted, but God never does. He's always on mission. In fact, in the Wesleyan Church, we've been saying it this way, that we celebrate every time a disciple makes a disciple and a church multiplies itself. And we've added this phrase for North America, until there is a faithful Wesleyan presence in every zip code. How would that be? How would it be if we had a truly faithful, not only faithful, but a transforming presence in every zip code? Now, up in Canada, they're, because they're part of the North American, the Canadians, but they have that postal code thing. It doesn't work like zip code says. Our zip codes are like areas. Theirs are like, hey, our street, these three people have their own postal code, because there's not many people in Canada anyway, right? So they've decided that they're changing it. Instead of zip code, they're saying by every Tim Hortons. And just thinking that, if they get near every, they'll be reached. So I just want to remind you, God's always on mission. He's on mission this morning. Second thing is God's never surprised. God is never surprised. I get surprised all the time. I had something this week surprise me. It's just like, I did not see that coming. But God is never surprised. I had somebody, when I first took this job, that retired. And I thought they were going to retire like in a while, like not like in a month or so, And I got back from a trip to Haiti, and I had a resignation letter on my desk. I'm like, what? And I went before God. I was so surprised. I said, God, I was so surprised by that. And the Lord said, yeah, I didn't see that coming either. No, he didn't. No, he didn't. And in fact, he had already been aligning things to come together. So that's going to tie to this third big thought, and that is that God is always in conversation. You may seem a little surprised by what he says to you today, but it's no surprise to him. He's always in conversation. I love Jeremiah 31:3 says that God appeared to us in the past. He always takes the initiative. God appeared to us in the past saying, I have loved you with an everlasting love. I've drawn you with my loving kindness. God appears to us and speaks to us. Now, I know for some people that's a little like, ooh, like one person said, why is it when we talk to God, it's called prayer, but when he talks to us, it's called schizophrenia? Sometimes it's a little like, you've been around people like, God told me something, and like, oh, he didn't tell you that, he didn't tell me that. Ah! But the reality is the Holy Spirit lives inside of us, and he does speak to us primarily through his word. No question about that. First and best place. Always we stand against the word, make sure that what's true. But God, in his Holy Spirit, fills us, and he prompts us with things. And I believe that God's been having a conversation with all of us this week, whether you've been tuned in or not, and that in these moments, he's going to speak to us. And then he'll continue the conversation, because he's not limited. So I want to encourage you, whatever he says to you, say yes. Does that make sense? Like, I don't know if you've ever arm wrestled with God. He wins. He wins. Every time. Every time. And so would you just agree to say yes? In fact, let's just say it together. Yes. Say it again. Yes. Great. That makes this message a whole lot easier. So, John chapter 4, verse 4. It's a powerful verse. The passage may be from a story called The Woman at the Well, John chapter 4, verse 4. It begins with this simple verse. Now, Jesus had to go through Samaria. Jesus had to go through Samaria. It's not the first time it's about Jesus that he had to do something. In fact, when he was just 12 years old, you remember that his parents took him to the temple for the Passover celebration. It's the first big deal. He's 12 years old. It's kind of a big deal to go to that thing. And you remember that they were there several days for the Passover celebration. And then they start making their way back to Nazareth. Jerusalem's here, Nazareth's up in the north, and they're making their way back. And after day one, kind of the end of day one, Mary says, Joseph, hey, where's Jesus? And says, I don't know, he's probably with some of the cousins and stuff because the whole families would travel together and stuff like that. They start searching around relatives. There's no Jesus. There's no Jesus anywhere. They're 2 days into the journey and they don't know where he is. And so they rush back to Jerusalem. And listen to this, for 3 days they can't find him. You ever lose one of your kids, like on purpose? And accidentally, you ever have that happen? I remember one of our kids lost in the mall, and she was just at that height, little tyke, where she could get into like the clothing in a store or something and just, disappear. She thought that was a cute thing. We're in a mall. There's cute things you could get into, we can't, we're frantically looking for her. I don't know, it's 2 or 3 years we found her somewhere, and 3 days, they can't find him, right? And they finally find him in the temple, and you remember the story, he's teaching the religious leaders and stuff like that, and she comes in, and we have the words she said, but we have no idea exactly how she said it, right? I can just picture my mom. I don't want to picture my mom right now, but she says, how could you have done this to us? I think she probably didn't yell. She's in the temple, right? But I kind of sense it was tense. And what does Jesus say? Didn't you know I had to be in my Father's house? I had to. Bring forward to one of the greatest stories that Jesus ever told in Luke chapter 15, the story of what we call the prodigal son. And you remember the son finally comes to his senses and he comes back home and the father sees him from way afar. It's an amazing picture because the father is still running the farm. He's got one eye on the farm, but he's got one eye on the road. And he sees him and says when he's a long ways off and he runs to him. And the boy's ready to confess and repent and say, I'm so sorry, Dad. And he cuts him off, puts a robe on, puts a finger on, puts sandals on his feet, comes back in. They kill the fatted calf and a huge party going on. Big brother. I've got 2 of those. Big brother out in the field says, what's going on? I hear all this noise. Oh, your brother's come back. He is ticked. He is really, really upset. Father sends out one of the servants, bring in the older brother. He's got to come in. The younger brother's come home. And he comes, but he won't come in. He's got his arms crossed. And finally, the father himself has to go out and appeal to his son. And he just lets his dad have it. Like this brother, this son of yours, he says, has been doing, and he names all these rotten sins. And the father says, didn't you know we had to celebrate? This brother of yours was lost and is found. He was dead and he's alive again. We had to celebrate. Just a few chapters later, Jesus is telling his disciples, we're going to go to Jerusalem, and there I'm going to be falsely accused. I'm going to be beaten and tried. I'm going to be crucified, but I will rise again on the 3rd day. I have to go to Jerusalem. And one of the passages says that he resolutely turned to go to Jerusalem. Just sort of drift that way. Had to go. We come to John chapter 4. Now Jesus had to go through Samaria. No, he didn't. Actually, no, he didn't. You don't really go that way. In fact, Jerusalem's here. Nazareth, Galilee's up here. Samaria's right in between. Everybody hated the Samaritans. The Jews, they were half-breeds. They were left behind because they were the losers of the society. Any person not worthy of even going into captivity, they left behind. They intermarry with all the people. They don't have their own religion, so they take some of the Jewish religion and mix it all together and stuff. And the Samaritans hated the Jews, and the Jews hated the Samaritans. So literally what they would do is they would go over to up the Jordan River, and then over to Galilee. They would never go through Samaria unless it was an absolute emergency. And then you blew through as fast as you could. Jesus didn't have to go through Samaria. Nobody did that, especially people who are devoutly spiritual. But there was a woman. The woman there that he needed to share with. So I just want to remind us this morning that the mission is urgent. He had to go there. It was an unreached city. They were an unreached people. It was urgent. It was a priority. They have to go because there's this woman. In fact, later on in the same chapter, it was a verse we had on there earlier, that the harvest is ripe, Jesus says to his disciples. The workers are few, but right now, it's ripe. It's ready. And Jesus knows that. And so he's just so urgent about this. And I just reminded again how easy we get off mission. How easy it is for us to get distracted and totally miss out on what's going on. We're busy. We got things going. We got our phones to look at, right? I mean, isn't it ridiculous? And you know what? I was at this place where almost everybody was older than me at this dinner. And here's all the seniors looking at their phones and looking at their iPhones, you know? Like, you can't hardly go anywhere. Now, if you're looking at it right now, I'm not talking specifically to you. Well, I kind of am, but, you know, isn't it amazing? Like, we used to talk to each other. We used to look at each other at night. Now we're just looking at our phones. I was in Brazil, and I was staying in not so great a hotel, but I had a balcony. I was like, wow, I got a balcony. So I went out there and I looked. There was a cafe down below, and I counted 21 people. 21 people. 19 of them were looking at their phones. And I just felt so bad. Didn't those other 2 people have phones? Maybe we could take an offering this morning and make sure they have a phone to look at, you know, like, oh my goodness. What's happening all around us? What are the conversations that could be held with people that are right across from us, right nearby us? But we get so distracted with so many things. We get so busy. We're pulled in all kinds of directions. And pastors, I know what that's like. I remember that when I pastored. I pastored for 29 years. I remember the pull and the tug and this leader and this board member and this critical need. And then a funeral comes up and then, you know, and you're just pulled in so many different directions. But the mission is the most urgent thing. Jesus has invited us to join the conversation that he's already having with people. See, whenever you first witness, never the first witness. The Holy Spirit's already speaking. You can confidently go into anytime you share your faith knowing you're not the first witness. Now, they may not recognize it. They may even be resistant to it. In my own life, grew up in a non-Christian home. I had this big decision I made when I was 15 years old that I need to be a better person. I can't keep following the pathway my older brothers were going down. That doesn't seem like a good way to go. I never thought that was God speaking to me and prompting me in that. I look back now and go, he was stirring. He was calling me. He was expressing his love to me. So when a Wesleyan teenager invited me to come to their Wesleyan church, I was like, this kind of makes sense. I'm trying to be a better person. Maybe church would help, you know? And so I went. No idea that Christ was pulling on me. So when somebody shared the plan of salvation, my first was, whoa, I don't know. I mean, I knew I was a sinner. I knew that really well. Nobody needed to actually tell me that. I already knew that. But I was overwhelmed by the fact that God loved me and people loved me. I couldn't believe that. So when you join the conversation, but you know what? We got to be listening. We got to be listening for his promptings. We got to be listening for the way he works in people's lives. And I just want to encourage you. You know what? It's so essential that you listen. And so you got to put on the big ears, you know? Most of us have a big mouth, but you know what? We need more of this. First and foremost, to hear the Spirit's voice. Are you listening to him? But also the cry of needs around us. And that doesn't usually happen with how you doing. It happens with the second question, like, hey, how you really doing? Is there a way I could pray for you today? I've just been thinking about you today. You've come to mind several times. Is there a way I could pray for you? Now you can do that on your phone. In fact, it can be a powerful way. Very few people get listened to these days. Maybe the most important thing you'll do the rest of the day is actually listen to somebody and pray. And how might God use that in your life? Here's the second thing. The mission overcomes barriers. Oh my goodness. You know, when I think of, if I was going to go to a city like Samaria, because we go into all these places around the world, how do we do it? What's our strategy? You can't just walk in and say, I hope something happens, you know? So I would think that the strategy, any kind of time you're reaching into community, is who could I meet that would really have influence in this community? Maybe it's a business leader. Maybe it's the school leaders. Maybe it's a social leader in the community. Somebody of influence. You try to find those kind of people. And there was a woman. She's the plan. She's the plan. This woman is the plan. I mean, you talk about barriers to the gospel. She is the barrier, right? There's nothing about her would seem like this is the way to reach a city. There's religious barriers. There's cultural barriers. Any of you ever uncomfortable with other kind of cultures? I mean, sometimes it's not just language, it's just how people are. I mean, Tony's got that sort of southern thing because he's from Indiana South, you know? I mean, that's a different culture down there, you know? They have beautiful kind of hills and things. But, just getting to know people. I go around the world, and just even how people greet each other is so different. I go to Japan, and you do the bow thing, you do the bow thing. And it's always like, well, how many times do you bow? How low do you go, And it's not cool to go, like, are they still bowing, and if you bow one more time, will they bow one more time? Was I okay? How does that go? You don't shake hands, you bow, and I'm just, trying to figure that out. There's places in Russia where our work is. Women do not shake hands with people. It's a little more standoff, but they shake hands with Americans because they know we always, hey, how you doing? We stick out the hand, and they go, okay, I know you're whatever you are, and so here it is. But when we lived in Budapest, Hungary for 3 years. It's one of those cultures where they certainly shake hands and stuff, but we discovered that once somebody knows you, they actually kiss you on the cheek, both cheeks, and they just do the. They don't actually touch your cheek with their lips or anything. They just kind of, it's an air kiss, but definitely touch cheeks. And we had a landlord who's just a wonderful woman, very outgoing, elderly woman, and she loved us, and she just couldn't believe I traveled like I did and everything like that. And I could tell we were getting to know each other, that pretty soon she's going to kiss me, right? So I start studying this because it matters which way you go. It matters which way you go. So I'm in the mall and I'm just watching. Here comes a couple together, and they kiss, and here's two friends, the girls, and I'm thinking I got to be ready, and it's go left, it's go left, it's go left. I'm just watching. There's consistency. There's a pattern to it. Okay, good. I come home this one day and she sees me and she comes down the steps and I go, here it is, go left, go left, go left. I went left, she went right. We kissed on the lips. She laughed. I had nightmares for weeks, It's just trying to figure out the differences. And you know what? That's just a small little aspect of culture. Tiny, really, in comparison to the bigger issues. They came from different cultures, Jesus and this woman. Gender. In fact, the woman even says, how is it that you, a Jewish man, the religious barrier, a man, am speaking to me, a Samaritan woman? Like, she's shocked. You are crushing all of the natural barriers and walls between us. Who are you? Jesus just steps right into it. She goes on to talk about worship. You guys worship down there in Jerusalem. We worship here. We think we got the right worship together. You think you do. I had the privilege of worshiping a lot of different places. I enjoy every place I go. Most of the time I don't know the language, but I love the worship. The most compelling worship experience I've been in was in a house church in one of our Turkic Arabic fields, where the worshipers sang with such heart, with such enthusiasm, such passion, in a complete whisper. So moved. Because for them to sing out could well mean that they would be arrested. We just had one of our missionaries from that country who on re-entry time, was denied access, blacklisted, probably never allowed to go again. One of our most fruitful witnesses, one of our most compelling leaders. And the only thing we can think is that he was a little bolder with his faith was tracked down. Okay. Sometimes we fight about worship here in North America, and I just go, come on. I also see the barrier of just the sin-holiness spectrum. This woman had been married. Jesus says to her, you've been married 5 times. You're living with a guy right now. Jesus is the perfect, he is holiness embodied. And he's talking to a woman. Hey, how are you doing with reaching across the barriers to people that are very unlike you? How easy is it to be just appalled by sinners instead of engaged with them? Sometimes we're the barrier. Sometimes we're so judgmental. And you know what? People pick up on that very quickly and very clearly. I think sometimes we're the kind of people that are walking around, with a magnifying glass trying to find sin in people's lives and in each other. Whoa, whoa, whoa. Move on. We're looking for that. And isn't it amazing when people look at us, they don't want us to use this. They want us to use this one. We use this big one, but, just use this with me because it's really hard to see anything in my life. Because it's just so. Sometimes our judgmentalness keeps other people away. We build walls. And sometimes we're the barrier because we don't believe God could use us. I'm telling you, he can use you. He loves to use you. What barriers hold you back? You see, ultimately, this isn't about us feeling comfortable. This is not about us being accepted in our witness. This is not us feeling like, well, I really know what I'm doing. It's about following the promptings of the Holy Spirit. Well, the mission's also life change. Jesus saw this woman. He saw a community. He knew that a people could be transformed. And that's what happens to this woman. In fact, do you remember the disciples come up at one? They're going, what's going on? You're talking to, they're thinking all these thoughts. The scripture records all that for us. And the woman leaves. She goes in. It says she goes into the city and she speaks to the men of the city and says this, come see a man who told me everything I ever did. Awkward moment for some of the men of the city, actually, married 5 times, living with a guy right now. Come see a man who told me everything I did. Did he mention my name? I'm just asking, just checking, But the men come, and soon all the people come, and Jesus then stays there 3 days. Like, that's crazy too, because if you had to go through Samaria, you booked through, ran through, got out of the area as soon as you could. You certainly didn't stay there. To stay there meant you were open to their hospitality. You stayed in their homes. We don't do that. By the way, who have you had in your home lately? We meet way too often at coffee shops and restaurants and lost the place of the home. One of the greatest barriers to reaching out to Muslims who live among us these days is that their whole life is built around what happens in the home. They did surveys of people who have immigrated here, and while they feel like Americans can be somewhat outwardly friendly, they never get invited into their home, which is the ultimate in rejection. Jesus stays here 3 days. The people say to the woman, we no longer believe because you shared with us. We've heard for ourselves. And the whole city is transformed. In fact, in Acts chapter 8, Philip goes there. Everybody receives Christ. It's this incredible experience, forever changed. She's a new person. Now she's a disciple of Jesus, and she's bringing others to him. She's a disciple making disciples who make disciples. So, how's God speaking to you today? For some of you, when I talked about the prayer cards and when your pastors talked about the prayer cards, you said, you know what, I need to amp it up on this prayer thing. I need to get more serious about that. I'm going to grab some of those cards, and I can't tell you just how invaluable that is. It's just so critical to everything we do. And if God spoke to you about that and you said, you know what, go back to get a prayer card and start praying. It could well be that God spoke to you about giving. And you know what? The mission didn't cost less this past year. Your giving is essential. Some of you say, well, yeah, I know people do that. That's a good thing. I can remember as a pastor, I challenged every single person in our church, down to the little kids. I remember one year, my daughter, who was just at the starting age of babysitting, like the 12, 13-year-old, which is the best babysitter, because when they get 15, 16, they got boyfriends and stuff. And, oh, yeah, I didn't, the kids burned the house down. I was on the phone, texting, sorry. And she just decided one year that she would give everything she made from babysitting to Faith Promise. And she was brand new to the whole deal, right? I mean, she was just probably babysat 3 times at that point. And she never told anybody this story. She just told us and told God that that's what she was going to do. That year, she got called so many times. And somehow people would find out the story. Hey, I know you're doing that whole thing for missions and stuff. Thanks for babysitting our kids for 2 hours. Here's $25, And I mean, she was at the top givers in our church that year to missions. She's never babysat since. I mean, it was overwhelming. She's just like, I don't want to say no, but I hate kids now. It was just so, and it was just like, oh my goodness, because it's not about actually what we have, it's about what we can trust God for. Yeah. Maybe God's been speaking to you about the giving thing to say, you know what, step out a little bit further. You can trust me, because I've got it all. Some of you say, I've never done that. Do it now. Do it between now and April. Let's get this goal met. It matters. God may be speaking to some of you about going. Maybe it's a trip that's coming up that you guys are sponsoring or hosting. Maybe it's about going like with the rest of your life. I was a pastor for 29 years. When I was 50, I just sensed we were done pastoring and we had to go. I was in a very great church. It was going really well. I mean, it was going really well. Last year, they were the #1 giving church to Global Partners. That's how great a church it was. God put his finger on my wife and I and said, it's time for you to go. And maybe that's what he's saying to you. For some of you, it's a beginning conversation. It just sort of started. It just sort of started stirring. You're like, is this even really, like, was that really God? Or was that like just a bad pizza last night? And it's just, but for some of you, it's another part of the conversation that's been going on. And for some of you today, it might be that the conversation's really at a decision point where you have to say, okay, I'm going to actually go. And I'm telling you, we can use all kinds of people. You say, well, I'm not trained for that. Awesome. What are you trained with? Because God can use that. You say, I don't know. I mean, I've never been out of Grant County. Well, time to get out of Grant County. Okay, so we can walk you through that. In fact, Adam Jones is with me this morning. He's part of our mobilization team. We've got cards out there. We can take your information. We can give you a business card of our mobilization team. They're experts at walking with people, because nobody says on Sunday, I'm going to go, and leaves on Monday. But we can help walk that journey with you. We'd love to do that. So if God's been speaking to you, here's the deal. You already said yes. You already said yes. And I'm calling some of you to be missionaries. You see, when I meet doctors, almost all of them tell me about how they met a doctor, or they were around medical stuff and they were inspired to be a doctor because of it. Every teacher I've ever met has told me about their 4th or 5th grade teacher, their 7th grade teacher, who was so compelling. They said, I'm going to be a teacher. My dad's a carpenter. 3 of my 4 kids work with wood, and every one of them would say, Grandpa just got me involved. I couldn't believe I could take this chunk of this and make this. Who inspires people to be pastors? Who inspires people to be missionaries? If we don't do it, who will? So I'm asking you today to consider this. God's tapping on your heart. Love to have a conversation. Say yes. Say yes. Would you stand with me in prayer, please? With your heads bowed and your eyes closed, I'm going to ask you to do something really simple this morning. This is super simple. If God spoke to you in a very significant way today, I don't know what that is. I don't particularly need to know what that is. But if God spoke to you this morning, I'm going to ask you to do something really simple, starting over on my right, the left side of the congregation. I'm going to ask you to make eye contact with me. Just that simple. I'd love to pray for you. I don't know you, but God does. And I want you to sort of seal how he spoke to you this morning by just looking up at me. So over on my right, your left. Yep. Thank you. Thank you. If I miss you, just give me a little hand wave. I'm coming across the first center section on the left side here. God spoke to you and you said, you know, his voice this morning is asking me to do something. Yep. Thanks. Thanks. If you're in the back, just give me a little wave because, yep. Coming across the second center section. Thanks already. I see you. Yep. Thank you. Yep. Final section. Balconies. God spoke to you. God, you've seen these eyes. More than that, you've seen their hearts and you've spoken into their minds, their ears today. Would you seal what you just said to them? Would you help them to know what the next step of action is? That they would maybe go talk to the pastor, maybe talk to a friend, maybe talk to a family member, maybe come and talk to Adam and I at the table. I pray, Lord, that they would begin to take some action steps. For some, it's sort of first thoughts like, what should I do? I'm not sure. Would you make it more and more clear? Would you continue the conversation that you've already had in these moments to continue so that the conversation grows? They've responded in obedience and said, Lord, I'm saying yes to you. And some of them are filled with a little bit of fear this morning. I pray that you take away the fear and replace it with love. I know some of them are probably a little confused. Would you bring clarity to that? Because you're the God of order, and you don't work within confusion, but you settle and bring peace. And there are some that are wondering, if I make this decision, what are the implications going to be? How would my family respond? How would my church respond? How would my friends respond? Lord, would you just bring them back to the most important responses, how they respond to you. Fill them with courage in the midst of that. I want to thank you for this church. I want to thank you that they're a sending church, that they're an engaged church in their community and in the regions beyond that and beyond that, hard places and far places. I want to thank you that they've given themselves to the mission that is the whole mission. And I pray blessing. I pray abundance over them so that they can be a greater blessing, not just to these missions, but there would be more missionaries sent out, even as a result of today, that they'll come on board with. Send out because you're so good. Pray your blessing over Pastor Tony, especially, and Pastor John as they give leadership to these areas of mission so significantly. The rest of the team as well, but in their unique focus, God, would you use them and bless them? And Lord, may they just, again, hear your voice and have faith to share the challenge of the mission around the world. I pray this in Christ's name. I understand it's pretty traditional to say, I send you out. And we do send you out today in your community, in your Super Bowl parties after the service tonight. Be on mission. Be on mission. God bless you. Thank you so much.